This is the new Maruti Suzuki Grand Vitara, the crossover that most of you have been waiting for. But I think it has been around, at least in spirit, for a while. Let me explain. Remember the S-Cross? It's underpinned by Suzuki's Global C platform, which also spawned both iterations of the Vitara Brezza. The Global C platform was then utilized again to create a new S-Cross for the global markets. Now Maruti Suzuki has taken it a step further and spiced it up to suit Indian tastes. So what you get is bolder styling and a more trendy design with the DRLs in the brow and the headlights in the bumper. At the rear, the sleek streak of LED taillights echo a bit of a Porsche Cayenne, Range Rover Velar inspiration, and these, coupled with the tastefully done Grand Vitara badging, make the tail appear premium like the rest of the car. The side profile shows off a longish front overhang that misbalances what could have been a nice two-box SUV-inspired design. But honestly, the front overhangs aren't a big matter of worry, both in terms of driving as well as aesthetics. Because those 17-inch wheels, I think they look quite handsome, they fill up the wheel wells quite well and take attention away from these overhangs. While the shape of the wheel arches and the 2600mm wheelbase is similar to the international S-Cross, the bodywork designed in India for the Grand Vitara not only lends it a more SUV-like form, but also gives it marginally larger dimensions. So that makes the Suzuki Grand Vitara and its platform sibling, the Toyota Hyryder, two of the largest cars in the segment. Now, which one is the better looking is what many of you have asked us. Well, honestly, the design is a personal preference, but I think the Hyryder has a more elegant front fascia. It looks a bit more stylish, a bit more elegant, while this is bolder, sportier. So if you want something that's imposing, something that's in your face, I think you would want to go with the Suzuki. If you want something a little more elegant, it's the Toyota that you would want to choose. While these twins don't have the massive stance of the Tata Harrier, there's no doubt that they look quite handsome to take on the Koreans and are more proportionate than the MPV-ish looking MG Hector. That said, compared to the cars like the Creta, Seltos or even Maruti Suzuki's own Brezza, the window line is actually lower. You can also see it from the outside, and subsequently even the dashboard line is lower. So the smallish disadvantage to that is that you do not get that commanding view of the road or a very tallish view of the road as you would in a typical high-riding crossover or SUV. But the bigger advantage is that ingress and egress are quite easy, both for kids as well as for the older audience. So that is a very big advantage in my books. Now, the very car-like feeling, the very easy ingress and egress were two of the biggest draws of the S-Cross, and those will remain big draws even for the Grand Vitara. Once inside the cabin, you will notice familiar Maruti Suzuki elements in the switchgear and steering wheel. Going with the overall theme, the dashboard has a grid-like layout which maximizes space, and depending on the variant you choose, you get a choice of all black or maroon on black combinations. At this price point, you don't really expect scratchy plastics. Yeah, there are a few soft touch panels. You expect more of them in this cabin on the more common touch points. So that is a bit of a downer, yes, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of Maruti Suzuki cars get these kind of scratchy plastics, but they withstand the test of time because they are quite nicely put together. And I hope the same with the Grand Vitara as well. But yeah, soft panels would have definitely helped. The 7-inch infotainment is now familiar too and gets wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto capabilities, a few connected tech features for tracking and fencing, and the ability to install certain apps. Low and mid-level trims get 2-port instrumentation with a 4-inch multi-info display that's very similar to other Maruti cars like the Baleno for example, while the range topper gets a fully digital instrumentation that has a very Toyota layout to it. There is a heads-up display too. As for the screen, the heads-up display, these are elements that we've seen on some of the newer Suzuki models, but now here they get a lot more breathing space because of the larger cabin space you get with the Grand Vitara. The same is the case for the passengers as well. The front seats are quite accommodating even for larger passengers, and the upholstery is the most premium quality that Maruti Suzuki has ever used. The ventilation function, which is only available on the front seats, works well but is quite noisy. Even the rear seats are quite accommodating, wide, tall and pretty upright, even in their slightly more reclined position. But comfort-wise, I don't see any problems here. I have no complaints. I get a lot of foot space. As far as headroom goes, no problem at all for my height of 5 feet 8. 6-footers might feel a bit too claustrophobic, especially if you get the top-end variant which has this big panoramic sunroof. Because of the sunroof, the roof liner or the headliner sits a little bit lower. The one with the smaller sunroof will liberate a bit more headroom at the rear, so choose accordingly. Now, in terms of the overall comfort, I quite like it. 2 adults of my size and a kid shouldn't be a problem. 3 adults of my size will definitely be quite a bit of a squeeze. And a little bit of trivia, apart from the Export Baleno, this is the only other Maruti Suzuki car to get a 3-point seat belt for the center passenger. Now to go nitpicking, the window doesn't go down completely. The light switch, it sounds a bit clunky. The flaps for these USB ports and even these AC vents here, they feel a bit flimsy. Not sure if they'll withstand the test of time. And the audio quality, yeah, it's pretty good with the RKMS tuning and everything, but the soundstage doesn't seem like it's in the center of the car. It always feels like the sound is coming from near the floors because the speakers are mounted lower in the door and they don't really elevate the sound that well. So that surround sound experience is not quite there. And they have a 360-degree camera, which is great news, but I think for the animation, the model they've used is not the Grand Vitara. I think this is the Toyota Hyryder. Look at the tail lights. It's not a seamless strip. And finally, the roof liner for the panoramic roof. Well, it lets quite a lot of sun rays in, so with overhead sun, it starts getting quite hot. And look at the cloth, it just feels loose. The cloth just feels very flimsy. It just feels like it's going to start sagging down in a few months. The bigger concern, however, is the boot space. Only 373 litres for the mild hybrid variants, which is comparable to sub 4 meter crossovers, or 265 litres for the strong hybrid variant, which is lesser than even a Baleno. And that is because, like most ICE-derived hybrids, the battery pack sits behind the rear seat, eating into the boot space. The hybrid also hides the spare wheel beneath the car, while the smart hybrid plonks it in the boot floor. Now, this is one space or segment where we've seen most players offer a variety of powertrain options, and Maruti Suzuki and Toyota together have followed suit. There are quite a few powertrain configurations on offer, everything from naturally aspirated engines, two-wheel drive configurations, all-wheel drive, mild hybrid, strong hybrid, you name it and it's there, apart from a diesel of course. Anyway, so the 1.5 litre petrol from Maruti Suzuki, the K series, now that is the absolute baseline that you can buy. You can specify it with a 5-speed manual or with a 6-speed torque converter automatic. So this engine, the power output, it does feel quite humble compared to its rivals, and it shows. To enjoy this car, you really have to drive in a very calm and composed manner. You will usually find yourself driving in the 2000 to 3000 RPM mark. That's both in the city as well as out on the highway. And those figures are consistent for the manual as well as the automatic. Pulling overtakes at city or highway speeds often needs a downshift. More so if you are traveling with a full house. The 6-speed torque converter automatic does its job quite well in the city or on the highway, and its convenience is hard to ignore. But it isn't the quickest of gearboxes and often makes a downshift only after the engine falls out of the power band. So the paddle shifters certainly help if you need to take manual control to pull quick overtakes or engage better engine braking. The 5-speed manual has long throws and a long clutch pedal travel. And the clutch pedal, though light, has a vague bite point which needs getting used to, especially if you are scaling inclines with a full load. We are also driving on some B roads, rough roads, the typical kind of stuff that you will encounter in the country. and the ride quality is actually quite good. Quite impressed with the kind of supple ride that this car offers. In fact, right now I think this is the best that Maruti has done in any of their cars. So in terms of ride quality, full marks to the Grand Vitara. It's perfectly equipped for the Indian road condition. In terms of the handling, however, as long as you're gentle with the car, as long as you enter the curve smoothly, you're gentle on the suspension, everything will be fine. If you are a bit too harsh, if you're just throwing the car around, if you're going too hot into corners, that is where you will face a fair bit of vertical movement from this car. So yes, it's not exactly a very sporty, a dynamic vehicle when it comes to driving around twisties. Be gentle with it, be laid back with it. That seems to be the key word with this car, and you should be absolutely fine. So buy this car for its ride quality, buy this car for its smooth ride over the bad roads, and not so much for enthusiastic driving around the bends. I hope that clarifies it. Compared to the International S-Cross, the Grand Vitara features longer suspension travel and more robust components for the Indian road conditions. While the Grand Vitara is predominantly front-wheel driven in all of its configurations, you can also specify the 1.5 mild hybrid manual with all-wheel drive, which Suzuki likes to call all-grip. Now, this is essentially a safety system, which means that it's an on-demand all-wheel drive system. It'll only send power and torque to the rear wheels when it detects slip at the front wheels. But it's a tool after all, and if you know how to use it wisely, you can use it to take the Grand Vitara on some pretty rough stuff. We did, and we returned quite impressed. We drove this car through a tailor-made off-road course, where it easily traversed through slush, scaled some inclines and showed off its hill hold function, crawled down with the hill descent control at a preset or fixed 10 kilometers an hour, showed off its tripod capabilities through the trenches, and also proved that its front and rear overhangs weren't a matter of worry, and the 25-degree approach or departure angle could be tackled with ease. The only downside is that the all-grip is available only on the manual, and in the hot conditions of Udaipur, the clutch was heating up quickly and becoming difficult to modulate on this obstacle course. But it's impressive how this otherwise safety-biased AWD works around the tricky stuff. One bummer is that you can lock all-wheel drive only with the snow mode, and the snow mode restricts the throttle response. It makes it quite dull. It also restricts the amount of power, and that sort of then starts feeling more of a safety feature again. They should have allowed the all-wheel drive to be locked independently, and that would have really helped. In sport mode, you do get more power. Again, there is AWD, but it's on demand. So only when the front wheels again start slipping, the power goes to the rear wheels. It's not AWD all the time. So I think they should have allowed the AWD to be locked independently. That would have given the driver a lot more control in tricky situations as well. But then again, this is an urban cruiser of sorts, so I'm not sure how many people are going to venture out into the wild with this car. The 360-degree camera also helps when driving on such terrain, and I wish that the tire pressure monitoring system was also available with the AWD. Furthermore, I think Maruti could have managed to get even more ground clearance from its smart hybrid by having a cleaner layout for the exhaust piping, like how Toyota has managed with the strong hybrid version. Apart from the AWD, the strong hybrid is the other big talking point for the Grand Vitara. So the hybrid justifiably gets a blue button for startup, and it usually starts up quite silently if there is enough juice in the batteries. So this essentially is good when you just want to get out of the neighborhood silently without waking up the neighbors, without waking anyone up. It really works quite well. Also, it will get off on pure battery propulsion provided there is enough juice, and then the engine will cut in as and when the batteries run out, or if the batteries need charging, or if there is load. So for example, if I'm on an incline, the engine will cut in again, If there is torque fill required, the batteries will support that again. So this system is a very intelligent system. It keeps complementing each other to ensure that whether you are driving in the city, on the B roads, cruising on the highway, or even driving around the twisties, it will ensure that with the battery power and with the engine power, there's always a seamless supply of power and torque so that you never really feel the dearth of it. At a combined system output of 115 PS, even the strong hybrid variant of the Grand Vitara is, well, pretty humble. Expect a 0 to 100 figure of around 12 seconds, give or take. There is a power driving mode which is best suited for driving around bends or inclines, as it manages a better power and torque delivery. But the eCVT configuration will make the engine rev high quite often. Even in this power driving mode, it doesn't have the eagerness of the powertrain that we've sampled in the Hector mild hybrid, for example. But the fuel economy gains far outweigh the lack of enthusiasm. A good driver will extract over 18 kilometers to a liter in the dulled eco mode in all driving scenarios. And with that, the Grand Vitara suddenly feels like the best buy in the segment. While there is a pure EV mode activated by this switch right here, how much range you will get out of that at city speeds depends on the state of the charge of the batteries. 3 to 4 kilometers at best is my estimate. So this hybrid system is completely done by Toyota. So it's very similar to the configuration that we've seen in the Camry, not similar to what we've seen on the Honda City hybrid that was launched recently. So essentially what it means is that the engine will also drive the wheels as and when required, unlike what we've seen in the Honda City. The engine will also charge the battery pack, and the two will also work in conjunction with each other as and when required. Now this system uses a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine in the Grand Vitara as well as the High Rider, and it also has that tiny 0.76, if I'm not wrong, 0.76 kilowatt hour battery pack. Now this battery pack comes with a lifetime warranty because, again, remember, this is a small battery pack. It's a instant charge, instant discharge kind of a battery pack. So it's not as complex as a typical battery electric vehicle. So Toyota and Maruti Suzuki can afford to give you a full lifetime warranty on this battery pack. And we've seen Toyotas use it for quite some time in the Camry. We've never really heard complaints about the battery pack going kaput or too many warranty claims or anything of that sort. So from that standpoint, from an Indian atmosphere standpoint, an Indian weather standpoint, you don't really have to worry too much about it. Hopefully this is going to keep running reliably just the way it has in other Toyota cars. But as I was mentioning, this strong hybrid powertrain is completely made by Toyota. The small batteries also mean that the strong hybrid is only about 80 to 85 kilos heavier than the mild hybrid two-wheel drive variants. The braking seems consistent and predictable across all the variants, and the strong hybrid also gets a dedicated B mode for stronger braking assistance from the powertrain. Though the strong hybrid belongs to Toyota, all the tuning for the mild hybrid, strong hybrid, and even the suspension and brakes is completely done by Maruti Suzuki. And Toyota's job here is to simply manufacture both the Grand Vitara and the High Rider. And Toyota say that their plant near Bengaluru can roll out 160,000 units of these two cars every year. Filling up those order books won't be difficult for the two brands given how potent this package is. I'm quite content with all the powertrain options on offer, and while neither of them feels enthusiastic, they all feel adequate, refined, and aptly tuned for the Indian driving conditions. The strong hybrid makes a strong case for itself, and the pricing is competitive enough for those missing a diesel in the lineup. If I had to go with the strong hybrid variants of either of these cars, I think I would side with Toyota, given their history of selling and servicing hybrids in the Indian market. I also think the design of the High Rider looks a bit more elegant to go with the sensibility of the hybrid powertrain. But if I had to choose any other variant, any other powertrain, I think I would go with the sportier looking Grand Vitara instead. I think the name also sounds a lot cooler, and this is a car that also looks good when it's dirty. Let me know what is your pick and why.